We're going to be in Mark chapter 2 and actually get all the way to Mark chapter 3 today, with three instances, really, of controversy. Because, in our day, we need more controversy. And in fact, controversy here between religious and the Lord. And so we're going to deal with some of those today from Mark chapter 2 to chapter 3. These three instances really surrounding the Sabbath day and what that means. Let's go, Lord, in prayer and ask Him to work in our hearts in this time. Father, we ask really for renewal in our hearts. Or that we would be like Jesus, that we would see Him as our Lord, our Savior, our Lord of rest, of Sabbath. Lord, that we would see His glory and that all things, even the troubles of our day, would pale in comparison. Lord, I pray for this little girl and plead for You to heal her. Lord, that she would not have to know the pain and suffering that comes with her condition. That her parents wouldn't have to know the weight of suffering of losing a child. But Lord, as we practice faith in trusting You for our nation, Lord, we cry out in faith and trust that You would heal this little one. And Lord, we trust You to do what is good for her parents, and for Your glory. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Mark chapter 2, we're going to deal with the Sabbath. You may be familiar with this term, but not understand fully the roots of it. If you remember the Ten Commandments, God said you will keep the Sabbath, right? Don't profane it. Don't make it common. Keep it holy. Practice Friday night to Saturday by the Jewish people. There's a bit of what's called Sabbatarianism in our day, where people think you have to come to church on Saturday instead of Sunday. And there's a rich history in the New Testament of people meeting on the first day of the week because that's the day Jesus was resurrected. And we're not here to fight that battle or hash that out, but Sabbath, what does it mean? Is it just the day of worship? Well, yes, that was part of what God intended for people to do, especially those who believe, was to set aside time to purposefully worship Him beyond just worshiping with their lives. In fact, the Westminster Confession and a few others detail for us, kind of summarize what the Bible teaches, that the whole duty of you and I as human beings is to glorify God. That is through giving Him worth by our actions, by our attitudes, by what we say, by what we do, and by our concentrated efforts to know Him and to reflect His glory. But what is the Sabbath? Was it just for that? No. If you notice, the restrictions in the Old Testament, part of what God designed for, which we'll deal with in a little more direct way today in this passage, is that man would take a day of rest. In fact, Sabbath was set up in Genesis chapter 1. On the seventh day, God rested from all His works. What was the work He was doing? God spoke and created. So the Sabbath day was set up partially as a rest. Ask any pastor, it's not a day of rest. Not anymore. But as Jesus pointed out, the priests even were working on the Sabbath, were laboring to present the offerings and stuff, and were still guiltless in their work there. And there's some understanding of the Old Testament there where the priests would rotate through in different segments so that they would even have a rest as well. but the Sabbath. And really, we want to begin a section here as we transition from Jesus calling us to follow. Now he wants us to know who he is. Learn of me. And now he's going to go head to head with the religious leaders about who really is head over the Sabbath. Or, as Jesus is going to put it, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. What is the implications of that? Well, let's begin in our passage here. Verse 18 of Mark chapter 2. There's a kind of a disconnect here from the last section. You could think of it as a scene transition, right? You know, you're watching a movie, the screen goes black for just a half a second, and it's a new scene, new characters or whatnot. Think of it that way here. It says, now, John's disciples of John the Baptist, right? Those who had followed John, but who had not taken the next step to follow Jesus. John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. And people came and said to him, that is to Jesus, why do John's disciples and the disciples as the followers of the Pharisees, their laws, why do they fast, but your disciples do not fast? This is a question from the religious group, from those who are religious, but it's more the group than the leaders. Verse 19 says, and Jesus said to them, can the wedding guest fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in that day. Now Jesus is going to give some illustrations. No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. If he does, the patch tears away from it, and the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is destroyed, and so are the skins. But new wine is for fresh wineskins. Then one Sabbath, he, that is Jesus, was going through the grain fields. And as they made their way, that is Jesus and his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to him, look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? And he said to them, have you never read what David did? When he was in need and was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priests to eat, and also give it to those who were with him. And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. And again, he entered the synagogue. This may be the same day as the previous few verses. It may be a different day, still dealing with the Sabbath here. He entered the synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand. And they watched Jesus to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so they might accuse him. And he said to the man with the withered hand, come here. And he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to harm or to save life or to kill? But they were silent. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. He said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him, that is Jesus. 3 instances of dealing with Sabbath, the laws, especially those that the Pharisees had set up around God's law. And the biggest point, if you get nothing else out of today, is really one of those central verses there, Jesus saying he is Lord of the Sabbath. Jesus is going to deal first with this group that comes up and asks, why don't your disciples observe the religious traditions? Why don't your disciples come and fast? Because Jesus is, as we'll see in a moment, the saving rest. Learn of Jesus. Why? Because he is saving rest. How can they fast when the joy of salvation is physically, bodily present? How can they fast and mourn when Jesus is with them? If you would know who I was, you wouldn't be fasting either, Jesus says. Now, it's John's disciples, those who have not taken the step of faith to trust Jesus. They've only really followed John and his teaching of baptism for repentance. And then with them is the Pharisees. And they're fasting. Now, in the Old Testament, we have fasting at several different occurrences. The fasting for repentance because of national sin. Personal sin. David is fasting and laying face down on cold stone floor because of his sin with Bathsheba while the child is sick and about to die. He's there in deep, concentrated effort to pray and ask God for mercy. The nation fasted over their national sin several times. Even in the book of Nehemiah, when it's brought to their attention what they have not been doing since the wall and the temple have been rebuilt. How they have transgressed once again, going into idolatry by marrying foreign wives. And they turn from their sin. They fast in repentance, mourning over their sin. But really, the Pharisees had taken it to kind of a professional level. They'd begun to develop a tradition around fasting, so that every Monday and Thursday they fasted during the daylight hours. And then they would go to the buffet afterwards and chow down. And the people come around, they see something different. Jesus, why don't your disciples fast like John's does? Like the Pharisees? Why don't they mourn? Why don't they look pitiful too? Look at Jesus' response. Can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? All right, we don't have as much the bridegroom idea anymore. Now it's the bride, right? All dressed in white and, big music that she comes into, big fanfare, and it's her special day and all this stuff. And now there's whole TV shows about which dress she should pick and cakes being made. And, we've turned it into a big production, right? Think of it this way. Can the guests at the wedding be sorry and mourning and fasting when the wedding party is there, when the bride is marching down the aisle? No, it's a joyful occasion. Maybe for her parents it's tears of joy. Maybe it's tears of regret. I don't know. There's an awful lot of crying sometimes at weddings. But overall, it's a joyous occasion. Jesus uses this to illustrate, can the people who are following the true bridegroom, can they really be fasting and mourning when the bridegroom's there? If you knew who I was, you wouldn't be fasting, he's basically saying. As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. Now maybe you're like me and you have a few things you don't care to eat. I'm not for seafood at all. If I were to go to a party and they had the little shrimps and everything else and all the sauce and a big spread there, you would see me with not a thing on my plate. I prefer not to eat sea arachnids. But that doesn't mean I'm not having a good time, right? Go to a wedding and maybe you were the jilted girlfriend first. I don't know. Maybe you are sad now. But most people, when they attend a wedding, they're happy, they're joyous. It's a good thing that these two are being married. Jesus says that there's going to come a day when the bridegroom is taken away, a day like ours, when Jesus is bodily present in heaven, and we await his return, that we mourn and fast for his return. But did you notice the people steeped in their external religion? They asked the question, why aren't you fasting? Don't you know the rules of society? Don't you know the rules of religion? The issue is that external religion improperly responds to the presence of God. Jesus is not new on the scene anymore. There's hardly a person in Capernaum who needs any sort of health issue help. They've been healed. He's been preaching the gospel. He's been going throughout the towns. So much so that now crowds are starting to follow. Can you really observe these external religion rules when God is with you? Go back to Genesis chapter 1. Before sin, when God walked with man. When there's bodily presence of God with man, there was no need for mourning. There's no need for fasting. And really the implication is here is if you knew who Jesus was, if you knew he was the saving rest, there would be no cause for mourning with his presence. But people steeped in their religion that is on the outside, because they've been following the Pharisees, have improperly responded to the presence of God. It's the same today. We have religious times of the year even. And I'm not discounting those. They're very good and useful for us to remember the birth and death, resurrection, etc. of our Lord. But at times, for most groups, they're just the external thing we got to do this week. And there's no presence of God there. Jesus gives an illustration to help us understand this. He says, no one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. All right, how many of you have ever patched the knees of a child's jeans? Maybe you take some from another pair of jeans, or you get those iron-on patches, right? Growing up, I think we were too poor for the iron-on patches, so we just cut them at the holes, and now they became shorts. If you patch a garment, especially in their day when they don't have pre-washed, hand-rocked, stained jeans and whatever else there is, and polyester and all the advancements we have, you didn't take a piece of new cloth and stick it in an old garment, because when the new cloth starts to shrink, just as Jesus says here, it's going to pull away. It's going to tear, make a bigger tear than was there before. Then he says, he uses another illustration about wine and wineskins. You don't take a new wineskin or a new wine and put it in an old wineskin. The new wine still is going through the fermentation process. It's going to expand. There's going to be gases. That old wineskin with its wrinkles in the leather and it's starting to decay is going to burst. The wine, he says, will burst the skins. Why? New wines for new wineskins. They're pliable. They can expand with the wine going through its natural process. He's using an illustration. You don't put the new on the old. You can't just add Jesus to your religion. You have to start with Jesus. If you knew who he was, that's where you'd start. Jesus, we see you walking around doing miracles. We're all happy to follow you. Just conform to our existing structure of religion. And so we see really what Jesus is getting at is that external religion is incompatible with true salvation. You can't have Jesus and have the old. You're going to get a bigger tear. Your wineskin's going to burst. Here they are, they've been following the Pharisees so much so that they really don't even know what the law teaches. What God expects of them. That all the law points to Jesus and points to our need for salvation. Why do you think that the psalmist who had the law, many of them who were faithful to it, cried out so often for God's salvation? Because they knew they were still missing the justification that they were looking forward to. Here's Jesus. He's walking around. Jesus, why don't you conform to our religion? Because your religion and Jesus are incompatible. Controversy, right? Why aren't you fitting in, Jesus? Well, here's the second one. On a Sabbath day, Jesus is going through the field, grain fields. He and the disciples, and as they make their way, the disciples who are hungry begin to pluck heads of grain. Now it's interesting because you're allowed to eat on the Sabbath. You're allowed to even get your ox out of the ditch on the Sabbath. You know, if you had a flat tire, a flat ox, and he rolled into the ditch, you'd be able to get him out, change the ox, you know. Even the Levitical law says that people can go through, and as long as they're not going through with a sickle and cutting down the stalks of grain, if they go through and pluck some heads of grain, they're allowed to do that in someone else's field. In fact, people are commanded to leave stalks of grain, whole stalks, for the poor and destitute. I point you to the illustration of that in the book of Ruth. One day, Jesus is going through the grain field, probably coming into town to go to the synagogue. He and the disciples, they've been out in the wilderness, going from place to place, coming in to worship on the Sabbath. Where are they going to go? There's no B&B. All right, there was no Best Western on the road between the two towns. They're hungry. It's lawful. It is technically lawful for them to do what they're doing, but the Pharisees have set up such a structure around God's law to protect God's law from us. The Pharisees look at the disciples, look to Jesus. Look at your dirty disciples. Why are they doing what is not lawful according to our rules on the Sabbath? One of the key distinctions of rabbinical teaching is to ask questions in response. I do this sometimes and it drives my poor wife nuts sometimes. But look at Jesus' question to them. Have you never read what David did? Don't you know your Old Testament there, Pharisee? Don't you know the Old Testament? Oh, I know everything about the Old Testament. Oh, yeah. And you can just start to see the wheels of the Pharisees starting to spin there. And haven't you read what David did when he was in need? What do you mean, Jesus? David was king, when he was hungry. When he and those who were with him, who were running from Saul in unjust accusations, even a death sentence. If Saul had caught David, it would have been a death sentence. How he entered the house of God. This isn't the temple yet. Solomon hasn't built it yet. This is the tabernacle. And apparently it was set up there at the time along the road of David's escape from Jerusalem. Well, not Jerusalem, that was later, conquest. From the headquarters there, from this capital. He entered the house of God. And what did he do? He ate the bread of presence. Okay, the Jewish law, God's ceremonial law, depicted that the priests were supposed to set on this altar some bread. Now, what did they eat all throughout the wilderness? Manna, bread. God was having them be reminded of his daily provision by them doing the same act by placing this bread daily. It was supposed to be baked daily, including Sabbath, placed upon the altar, and the old bread would be taken away, and the priest would eat it. Imagine being a priest and getting day-old bread every time. And no one was supposed to eat it but the priests. This was now consecrated bread because it had been purposed for the use of God and for the use of his servants, the priests. Have you not read, Pharisees, what David did? He went into the house of God, their scandal, and then he ate the bread of presence, not just him, but even those who were with him. Something which is not lawful, but for the priests to eat. Why? Because haven't you understood? We read it in Matthew's account of this. I wish you knew mercy, and I desire mercy more than sacrifice. He gave it, even David gave it to those who were with him, and he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is even Lord of the Sabbath. Learn of Jesus who is saving rest, but learn of Jesus who is Lord of divine rest. Whose law were the Pharisees trying to keep and to protect? God's, right? Don't you think God knows what the disciples can and cannot do? You think maybe Jesus would have said something to the disciples if it was truly against God's law? Because Jesus kept the law perfectly? But they have failed to learn who Jesus is. They think he's just a good teacher, a good rabbi. But if we understood who Jesus is, this wouldn't be a problem. He's going through the grain fields. They pick the grain. It's not lawful. Right? These are people who have rules about how far you can walk on the Sabbath. And then they have the ways for them to get around their own rules. Doesn't sound like our congregational body at all, does it? We're familiar with this. But they're not just doing it legislatively, they're doing it. This is how you please God, and this is how you get to heaven. Imagine if somebody told you your eternal soul depended on how far you walked on Sunday. Why? Because external religion starts to focus on other people's behavior. Did you notice who is right there next to the disciples, next to Jesus? The Pharisees, right? Were they in any sort of state of self-reflection and preparation before they go and worship God? Nope. They were looking around to see who was bad. Tell them what for. It's like the incident maybe some of you experienced as children. I did. You're sitting there in Sunday school, and you're supposed to bow your head and close your eyes and fold your hands and everything, right? No peeking, right? That was a big rule. And so you think to yourself one day, oh, I'm going to help the teacher out. I'm going to help enforce the rules. And then, after the prayer, you saw the other person looking around and doing everything else. And you've been, doing this, just making sure, see who's peeking. And you tell the teacher, oh, Teacher Johnny was peeking during prayer. And then teacher goes, and so were you. Here's the Pharisees. External religion focuses on other people's behavior. It has no internal self-reflection about my stance before God. It's about who is doing what. Jesus, don't you see your disciples? Jesus' response, have you not read? Don't you know the Old Testament? Are you that dense, Pharisee? You did something that's not lawful, but what was it? Needful, merciful, in line with God's character. External religion focuses on other people's behavior, but external religion fails to comprehend the heart and intent of God's command. If you knew what it meant, I would rather have mercy than sacrifice, this would not be a problem. Yes, God set out the law. The bread of presence was meant to be an offering to God that then helped feed the priests, because they were so busy mediating between God and man that they didn't have time even to bake their bread. So God provided it for them. But what's it to you, Pharisee, if God lets the priest be merciful to someone in need? I would rather have mercy than sacrifice, God says. We get so wound up on keeping the rules, and I do too. I like it because it's clear cut, black and white. I'll tell myself here for a few minutes. Years ago, I was working EMS, and I disagree with several of my coworkers because there was a controversy nationally about someone of high profile. I forget if they were a football player or actor or something supposedly important. And they had been speeding because there was someone in the hospital who was likely, a relation of theirs, likely to pass away. And so they were speeding and even evaded the police. And when they stopped at the hospital, they were arrested for evading the police and driving at unsafe speeds. And there was a large national outcry at the time because, oh, that's unfair. The person's just trying to get to the hospital. And I spoke up because I like rules. But he broke the law. Should we show mercy? Sure, that the judge should go, you know what? We understand why you're doing it. And I'm sure maybe even the officer, if the guy had stopped enough to explain to the officer who was pursuing him, hey, this person is dying in the hospital. They're dying now. I need to go. Likely show mercy. I like it. It's really black and white, but what does God say? Haven't you read about David? He is running for his life. And he goes to the sacred place of worship, and the priest gives him the bread. Why? Because I'd rather have mercy than sacrifice. I'd rather you show mercy than care about keeping all the rules. And we, in our external religion, flip this around, because we fail to comprehend the heart intent of God's command. That's why God says the first and greatest of the commandments is to love me with everything you are and love others, even, we could say, before yourself. Did you notice how he phrases the end here of this section before we move on to chapter 3? If you know who I was, you wouldn't even ask that question. So the Son of Man, this is one of Jesus' favorite ways to reference himself in the book of Mark. So the Son of Man is even Lord of or over the Sabbath. If you knew who I was, Pharisee, you wouldn't even ask why my disciples are doing this. Because you would understand I'm Lord of the Sabbath. But here's where external religion has a controversy with Jesus. External religion refuses to recognize Jesus as the Lord of the Sabbath. We'd rather have our figures, our rules, our traditions, what pleases us on how we worship the holy God. And we refuse, just like those Pharisees, to recognize Jesus as the Lord of the Sabbath. In our world, in our day and age, I don't know if you've paid any attention to it, even if you're aware of it, but there's a very large discussion about music and methods of worship. And it's all centered about preferences and traditions and what we would rather have. And we forget who is God of our gathering, who is Lord of our Sabbath. Because we're so focused on the external. It's interesting, he then again enters a synagogue, and you almost see it here. It's a setup, right? There's already a man there with a withered hand. They know Jesus heals. Everywhere he goes, there's healings. Oh, we know how to get Jesus. All right, where's Stumpy? Let's bring in Stumpy to the synagogue. Make sure he's there on Sabbath. Jesus will heal him and we'll get Jesus. In the synagogue, a man was there with a withered hand. They watched Jesus to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath. How dare you do work on the Sabbath? I mean, the one who created everything with just a word, and it's really work to heal someone? Okay. And why are they doing this? So they might accuse him. And he walks in. And he says to the man with the withered hand, "Come here." And looking at the Pharisees, he said to them, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to harm, to save a life or to kill?" Remember, the law says even if your ox happens to fall over and goes in the ditch, you can get him out. Be kind to that animal. Get them out of the muck and the mire. Get them back to where they can feed. If God's worried about oxes, what about human beings? Okay, Pharisees. Is it lawful to do good? I mean, I remember a commandment right there at the top that says, love others as yourself. But they were silent. They want to give it away. How dare he even accuse us of wanting harm for this man, because he's asking us if he should do good. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. I wonder if he's still looking at us with anger and grieving at the hardness of our hearts. He said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched out and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out immediately. I mean, the man has barely got his arm back and the Pharisees are filing out of the back rows. And they held counsel with the Herodians, their mortal enemies, because the Herodians have given in to Greek life and blended Jewish life with Greek life. They went to them to counsel how to destroy Jesus. We must learn of Jesus, why he's saving rest, he's divine rest. He who is Lord of the law of rest. Jesus is Lord of the law of rest, of Sabbath. If we knew who he was, we'd have a lot less disagreements among ourselves. He entered. There he is, the man with the withered hand. They watch so they may accuse him. Why? Because it makes you feel a lot better about yourself if someone else is worse than you. You ever get that feeling when you watch, the TV show Cops? You start singing along the song, Bad Boys, right? You're like, oh yeah, cops, get them, sick them. It's really entertaining when they let loose the dog and you see this German Shepherd or Malamute go running across the screen, all of a sudden, bam! If you're watching together in a group, maybe you start taking a poll on how the dog is going to tackle the person. It makes you feel good, doesn't it? I didn't do that. If we knew who Jesus was, we wouldn't be so stuck with our external religion that condemns others to justify ourselves. We discussed last week some in the beginning about our idolatry, because we've been harping on the sin of homosexuality, and it is a sin, it is something that must be brought up, but we've normalized and made approved heterosexual immorality even within the church. And we're not as bad as those homosexuals. And we condemn them when their own sin condemns them. We don't show them the love of Jesus because it makes us feel better about ourselves. We justify ourselves against them. Here's the Pharisees. They even set it up with the guy. Here's Stumpy sitting there. All right. He's been so perfect. Let's get Jesus. He can't resist to heal. We'll get him because it's Sabbath. And how dare you do something good on the Sabbath? And our external religion condemns others to justify ourselves. I'm guilty of it too. When Jesus looks around, he sees the man, he tells him to come forward, and he asks this hard question. Is it lawful to do good, even on the Sabbath? Or is the Sabbath reserved? Basically, we could understand it this way. Is the Sabbath reserved for doing bad? Have we set up a rule that the Sabbath is for doing bad, even by inaction? Should we save or kill on the Sabbath? If you have an ox out there, are you going to go and get him out of the ditch, or are you going to let him die there and dig his corpse out on Monday? When they don't answer, of course, he knows their hearts. We've already seen an instant when Jesus knows what they're even thinking. The man who's paralyzed, who's let down. But when he sees their hardness of heart, he's angry with them. External religion condemns others to justify self, but it also uses rules to refuse to do good. If they knew who Jesus was, if we knew who he was, they would have gotten this man who had the withered hand to Jesus a long time ago. But these are the same people Jesus is going to get after, because these are the people that say, well, I dedicated my wealth to the temple, to God. I dedicated it to God. So I'm sorry, mother and father, you're going to have to be destitute. I can't support you because there is no retirement system. There's no social insecurity. There's no Palestinian Medicare. There are no Roman social services. And the Pharisees would use their rules on top of the law to justify themselves in doing evil to even their own parents. That's where external religion gets us, when we fail to learn who Jesus is. What happens? The Pharisees go out immediately to hold counsel with the Herodians against Jesus. How to destroy him. Something that's been going on since the book of Acts. Of course, the chief priests, the rulers of the people, thought they had destroyed Jesus when he was crucified. But they were so scared of him that they place a guard that is ineffective in front of his tomb, and he still raises from the dead. Then his disciples begin preaching Jesus so effectively that then in the book of Acts they arrest the disciples multiple times, charging them, even beating them unlawfully, not to preach in the name of Jesus. This isn't the secular government doing that. This is religion. In the 15 and 1600s, even in our culture, Western European, the continent, Britain, religion persecuted those who named the name Jesus, taking them even to burn at the stake. External religion fixates on destroying Jesus because they don't know who he is. You and I are in danger, though, of external religion. Keeping the rules, failing to do mercy. I'm just as guilty and in danger of it as you. If we knew who Jesus was, that's why it tells us to learn of him. That's why we have so many books that describe the life of Jesus and then the continuing effects of his life and ministry after his ascension. That's why we have so many books that point forward to his first coming and then beyond to his second. But external religion says, Jesus, you're not keeping our rules, so we're going to have to vote you off. So, how does your religion and practice compare to Jesus? Now, I've made the Pharisees out to be the bad guys here, and they are. Maybe you weren't cheering them on, but maybe just in the back of your mind, you started to agree with them. Are we more concerned about mercy or our rules? How do your religion and practice not just compare to what Jesus is, but how does it relate to Jesus? Is he just the fixture of a name, but we have our own way to do it? We have our own traditions and rules. And I appreciate tradition just as much as the next person. I appreciate rules and law abiding. But how does it relate? Are we cut? Are we thinking and even convicted within our hearts about the mercy we have not been showing? Or would we be in that group that walked out to go have a meeting with the secular world on how to destroy Jesus? Do you even know who he is? Because if you miss anything from this passage, it's not as obvious, but Jesus over and over again proved himself to be Lord of the Sabbath. We could shorten it this way. Jesus is Lord. And one day every knee shall bow and every tongue will confess this, whether you want to or not, to the glory of God the Father. See, the Pharisees had missed it. He was just another itinerant teacher to them, going around and stirring the pot. They had a careful, organized way that was not too odorous to the Romans who were their keepers. They perfected the religion for their benefit. They had rules that made them prosper so they wouldn't have to care for the poor, for the destitute, even for their own parents. They had rules to condemn others so that they could feel better about themselves. And they missed Jesus. Because even the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. This controversy, these three different instances of it are all based on them failing to recognize who Jesus is. Who's Jesus to us? Is he just our get out of hell free card? Is he just our moral teacher and a good person we follow? Or is he Lord of the Sabbath in us? Let's pray. Father, we pray that you would convict us. Lord, I know there are many times where my desire for orderliness goes beyond what you have declared. And I practice that more than the mercy you desire. Lord, help us to see you this week, today. That you would be our Lord, that we would practice not just in keeping with your law, your rules, but according to the spirit of them. That we would show mercy. Lord, that we would honor you as our Savior, as you who is over Sabbath, you who is God, you who is the one that gives us rest. Lord, again, as we close, we plead once more for this child and who has the tumor, Lord, for healing there, that you would work supernaturally, that would be for your glory, that she would be healed and spared the suffering. Lord, work in our hearts this week, we ask in Jesus' name.